Neoterra looked like a planet mid-construction, a tangle of neon arteries and grav-lift bones reaching into cloud. Tower stacks bridged neighborhoods with glass ribs. Hover trams slid through mist like silver fish. At the street level, where the city never stopped leaking, the rain tasted like copper and old promises. Kai Aurelian knew every shortcut from Sector Delta's heat sinks to the drone docks. At 17 he was a courier, which in Delta meant part runner, part decoy, part scapegoat. He wore a patched hood with anti-chem threading, a cracked wristband tagged to 5 aliases, and a small habits of survival that had taken root the day his sister was stolen. Walk in reflections, not in light. Look up, breathe slow. Never be interesting. Tonight's package was a slim, ceramic column wrapped like a candy stick. The buyer had called it research hardware, which could have meant anything from medical nanites to a swarm key for breaking vaults. All Kai had to do was move it across 3 kilometers of bad air without dying or being noticed. He kept a hand on the courier's satchel strapped to his chest. It hummed faintly against his ribs, the way dangerous things sometimes purr. The rain thickened. On his left, a video facade sold Starlight Funerals. Your ashes launched into the Perseus arm. On his right, a noodle stall hissed with steam and saffron algae. The owner, Auntie Sue, spotted him and raised a ladle like a blessing. Kai flashed a 2-finger salute, didn't stop. If he stopped he had to think, and thinking led back to the empty room where Lyra's laugh used to live out above him. The sky split with sound, a grav car tearing its safety rails. Kai glanced up out of habit, caught a smear of polished black angling wrong through the vertical traffic. It clipped a delivery crane. Metal screamed. Burnt ozone slapped his face. The grav car hit the pedestrian glide with a brutal skidding bounce and slammed into a column of holoads. Confetti light fluttered. The car's canopy spiderwebbed, then blew outward into the rain. Smoke poured green from the vents. Kai was already moving. The courier rulebook said don't get involved. The human rulebook said otherwise. He slid across slick concrete, planted his boots, and wrenched at the mangled door. It refused. He set his satchel down against the column, turned, and kicked hard at the frame, twice. On the third, the lock screamed and buckled. Inside, an alien woman. Violet lilac skin flushed pale with stress. A crown of fine silver filaments braided around a high crest. Her belly, gravid, heavy, strained against a pressure suit. One arm hung at a wrong angle. Her other hand fumbled at the belt release. Her eyes fixed on his with a wild clarity. Please, she said in galactic common, accent luminescent. I am stuck. I've got you. Kai shoved the bent console aside, snapped the belt, and braced her with his shoulder. She was taller than a human woman, dense with a different kind of gravity. When she stood, her knees swayed. Pain stole the color from her face. Don't look, she murmured, teeth clenched. The lights will. A pulse arrowed past Kai's ear and punched a fist-sized hole through the car's hood. Plasma hissed. The shot came from the overpass, black-armored silhouettes peeling off a maintenance scaffold. Visors mirror dark. No city emblems. No flashing sirens. The kind that didn't file reports. Assassins. Kai single quotes S body answered before his brain did. He took the woman's weight, pivoted, and pushed them both behind the car as another bolt lashed the air and sprayed molten droplets across the ground. The droplets spat when they hit the rain. Can you run? He asked. The woman steadied, breath hitching. Yes, the child. We must move carefully. Yeah, he said, and pretended he knew a careful way to run. He scanned the alley, broken light, steam vents, a maintenance hatch 3 doors down he'd used once to hide from a patroller. Above, a moving billboard flickered with the smile of a toothpaste model. Teeth like polished moons, then shorted and died. A ladder led to a catwalk, but the assassins already had the high ground. Left, Kai said, and hauled her up, moving in half-lurch steps matched to the rhythm of her breath. The assassins split into 2 squads like ink in water. Suppressor fire chewed the edges of vending booths. Auntie Sue's stall lights popped. Somewhere glass fell a very long way, shimming. Who are they? Kai hissed. She didn't answer. Sweat filmed her crest. Her hand gripped his sleeve with desperate strength. As they passed the maintenance hatch, he yanked at the handle, stuck. He shoved the woman against the wall, dug up a knife from his boot, popped the cover, and bridge to contacts like Auntie Sue's grandson had taught him. The hatch clunked. Inside yawned a vertical shaft smelling of rust and steam. Ladders, he said. Can you? I can. She set her jaw. Help me start. He climbed first, one hand free to brace her foot on the first rung. Then the second. The metal vibrated with shots buttery sizzling past the hatch mouth. A voice below barked orders in a tongue Kai didn't know. He recognized the tone, clinical, not angry. The tone of people to whom killing is a task. A shot kissed the hatch frame, detonated. Heat swept the shaft, hot enough to sear the hair along Kai's wrist. He climbed faster, counting rungs, counting breaths. 60 up, and the shaft split onto a mezzanine stuffed with forgotten city guts, cables, coolant drums, an old security drone asleep under dust. He swung out, helped her through, kicked the hatch shut, and twisted the manual seal. He caught himself staring at her arm, a fracture swell, the skin shimmering with biofluids that refracted light into small rainbows. She noticed his look and bared her teeth in what might have been a grimace or a laugh. It will knit, as long as I do not shock it more. But the child is early. The stress, we need a med bay. He knew too. One asked questions. One asked for cash. He had neither answers nor cash. He pulled the ceramic column from his satchel, laid it on a crate, and unzipped the side pocket for a slim black puck, slightly sticky from the adhesive he'd smeared on it months ago. EMP charge. He'd been saving it for a rainy day. It was very much raining. Footsteps clanged below. Then the ugly cough of a cutting torch meeting the lower hatch. He looked at the woman. She was breathing through clenched lips, counting, controlling. He recognized the same stubborn math he did when fear tried to take his hands away from him. I'm Kai, he said, because names help keep people real when the world wants to turn them into bullets. What's yours? She hesitated. The city hummed. Lysera, she said finally. Lysera Vorn. He almost dropped the puck. Vorn, as in Vorn Biologics, Vorn Transit, Vorn Mining. The name painted on ships and schools, and the back of the bus that took Lyra away. The name attached to contracts written in text so small it looked like dust. Okay, he said. Later could be for rage. Now was for running. Lysera, we're going to move again. When the door opens, they'll throw flash. You'll want to cover your eyes. My eyes adapt, she said. But she took the sleeve he tore off his jacket and tied it loosely like a veil. Kai crawled to the maintenance platform's edge and peeked down. The torch light lit the hatch rim. He flicked the emp, set the timer with his thumb. 10 seconds, and set it on the rail right above the hatch, where the pulse would flood the entryway and fry visors, comms, and guns without turning them into kettles of exploding metal. Hold, he whispered. The hatch blew inward with a dull whump. Black helmets knifed through the gap. Now, Kai said, and nudged the puck with his boot. It fell, bounced once, and blinked twice in his peripheral vision. The pulse hit like a thunderclap you only felt. The lights in the shaft died. The cutting torch coughed into silence. Below, swearing piled up in at least 3 languages. The smell of hot insulation rose like a ghost. Go, Kai said. They moved. Through a cable crawl, across a catwalk that trembled under Lysera's careful steps, down a ladder to a corridor lined with broken hatches. Their shadows stretched long, and then snapped short in the fickle emergency glow. Kai's brain ran ahead of his feet, mapping routes. If they could reach the old transit tunnels, the ones decommissioned after the flood, he could take them to the smuggler's clinic that owed him 3 favors and a bowl of soup. Why are they after you? He asked between breaths, partly to understand, partly to keep her anchored in the world of questions and answers instead of pain and fear. Lysera kept pace. One hand braced against her belly like she was holding the moon steady. Because of who I am, she said, and because of who I carry. Her gaze flicked to him. For a moment he saw not fear, but a bright, assessing intelligence. You move like someone who has practiced moving. Delta teaches, he said, and almost smiled. Also I run for a living. She started to reply, then flinched, a low sound escaping her throat. She pressed a palm against the wall, fingers splaying, nails, not quite nails, anchoring in the softened concrete. Her crest dimmed and brightened as if a tide ran through it. Contraction? Kai asked, though he had no right to know the word. Yes, another breath. 7 minutes since the last. I am not due for 19 days. 19 days. He did the math of distance and detours. They didn't have 19 minutes. The corridor ended in a circular hatch stamped with an old transit sigil, a stylized wing. The console was dead, but the manual crank still sat in its recess. He gripped it, leaned his weight, and turned. The hatch groaned like an animal with bad dreams and rotated a quarter turn. Cold air washed over them, smelling of wet rails and iron. They ducked through into a cathedral of machine bones, the abandoned sublevel tram. The rails, twin lines of rust, ran into dark. Water dripped steadily from a cracked seam somewhere overhead. Old maintenance drones hung in their cradles like sleeping bats. On the opposite wall, a mural peeled away in curls, children of different species riding a bright red tram, hands up, mouths open in delight. Someone had spray painted over the tram, "We never arrived." Kai's throat tightened. He pushed the feeling away and led Lysera along a maintenance walkway that flanked the rails. He counted his steps to keep his pace matched to hers. 15, 16, 17 above, somewhere behind them. The clatter of boots spilled into the corridor they'd left. No voices now. Professionals again. "We have a minute," Kai said. "Maybe less." Lysera glanced at the mural. "Do you know the way?" "Yeah." He hopped off the walkway onto the ballast, grabbed a pribar from a rusted tool cart, and wedged it under a floor grate he remembered. The grate popped free, revealing a throat of darkness that breathed damp air. "This drops to a service conduit. It connects to a drainage tunnel that connects to a forgotten kitchen. That connects to the back room of a clinic that patches up people like me, and never asks who shot who." Lysera peered down, then back the way they'd come. "Go, you first," he said. "Feet first, then brace. It's only a meter drop. I'll help you through." She didn't argue. She moved carefully, testing with one foot, then sunk into the narrow space and let herself slip. Kai took her forearms, steadied, rotated, and lowered her until her boots touched. She exhaled a sound that was not quite a sob and braced her good hand against the conduit wall. The boots above sharpened. A beam of white light swept the tram hall and caught the dust motes in a hard column. Kai dropped after her, replaced the grate by feel, and crouched in blackness that smelled like cold pipes and old rain. His eyes adjusted. The conduit was a ribbed cylinder meant for fingers smaller than his. Cables ran along the top like tendons. "You okay?" he whispered. "Yes." Her fingers found his sleeve again, lighter now. "Your heart is very loud." "Yeah," he said softly. "It does that." They crawled. The tunnel forced intimacy, elbows and knees, shared breath, the necessary silence of prey. Lysera's breathing steadied into the rhythm she'd been counting, then stuttered, then steadied again. Kai followed the crook in the conduit by memory, trusting the map in his head more than the city beneath his skin. After 15 meters, a vertical outflow pipe appeared on the right like a throat with a ladder welded inside. He put his ear to it. Nothing but the white noise of rain. He climbed, popped another grate, and tasted the sweet, mildew flavor of the old drainage tunnel, his childhood's hide-and-seek. They moved faster here. Bent at the waist, the tunnel widened, then opened into the forgotten kitchen he'd promised, racks of pans thin with dust, a cold stove, a mural of an octopus chef giving a thumbs up. Somewhere rats lived royal, but tonight the room felt paused like a stage awaiting actors. He crossed to the back, pressed his shoulder to a warped door, and it popped out into a dim hallway that smelled like antiseptic and stubborn hope. A chime went off, the startled cry of a bead curtain. A figure stepped out from behind it, thin and elegant even in a faded lab coat. She had copper circuitry tattooed under her eyes and a spine that looked one bad decision. "Away from snapping, kid," said Dr. Mirren, and then saw Lysera, and her eyes went sharp as a scalpel. Oh no. No assassins in my clinic. We brought them a maze," Kai said. "And an EMP. Buy us 10 minutes. 8, Mirren said. "You always did oversell." She thrust a thumb over her shoulder. "Room 2. On the slab. I'll grab a biobed and pray to all the gods I don't believe in." Lysera moved to the doorway and paused. Her gaze met Mirren's. Some exchange passed between them too quick and complex for Kai to catch. Mirren nodded once, like a promise. Inside room 2. Everything shrank. The bed too small for Lysera's height, the instruments too human, the ceiling too low. Lysera sat with ceremonial precision. She took Kai's hand without seeming to notice she had done it. "You saved me," she said, voice even. "And the child?" He shook his head. "We're not done yet." Outside, the clinic lights dimmed and then swelled. Brownout chasing EMP hangover. Somewhere far away a door slammed with official certainty. Lysera squeezed his fingers, then looked him in the face with a clarity that erased the distance between worlds. "My name is Lysera Vorn," she said again, as if names had to be hammered into fate. "My mate is Zirak Vorn. He will come for me. He will come for you. Tell me, human boy who runs like a shadow, what do you want in exchange for your courage?" The question landed like a thrown stone in his chest, sending ripples through old water. Lyra's face surfaced, 8 years old, hair in puffs, clinging to the bus rail with both hands. The Vorn logo stamped on the seatback in front of her. The way she tried to be brave for him and failed and laughed anyway. Kai opened his mouth to say nothing, the safe thing, the quick thing, and then the clinic door shook as someone hit it with something heavy, and the truth in him surged up like a flare. "I want," he began. The door slammed again. A lock sheared. Mirren swore somewhere in the hall. Kai felt Lysera's hand tighten on his, astonishingly strong, anchoring him in the small bright rectangle of a room. "I want my sister back," he finished, surprising himself with the steadiness of it. Lysera's pupils widened. For a heartbeat, the running city and the rain and the boots and the guns were all outside the room, dim as ghosts. For a heartbeat, there were only two facts: a boy who had kept running because he had nothing else, and a woman who had everything except now. "Then we will ask that," she said. The door exploded inward. 3 figures in black flooded the doorway like something poured. The first raised a weapon. A white disc flashed, Mirren's throwing scalpel, and bit the weapon's conduit. It spit sparks and went dead. The second lunged. Kai moved without thinking, grabbed the instrument tray, and sent it crashing. Metal clashed with armor. The room rang like a bad bell. And then a new sound folded the others into silence, a resonance that filled the bones, that made the air feel thick. Not a siren, not a gun, something like a ship engine, but inanimate. Every assassin in the doorway stopped as if remembering they had left the stove on. A pressure wave washed the clinic, unseen but undeniable. The violet-veiled crest on Lysera's head brightened with internal light. "She is coming," Lysera whispered, astonishment and pain and fierce joy braided in the words. She looked past the assassins, past the broken door, toward something only she could see. "Our daughter is coming now, above the city, somewhere beyond the rain and neon and the measured cruelty of men in masks." A very rich and very dangerous man looked up at an alarm that had never sounded before, and turned his empire like a ship toward one point on a map dot inside the small room. Kai tightened his grip and set his feet as the assassins reset their intent. "Okay," he said to Lysera, to himself, to the world that kept asking for more than he thought he had. "Let's finish the run." When Kai woke, the ceiling above him was the wrong color. It was too clean, too white, too soft-edged. Not the yellow-stained ferrocrete of Sector Delta's flophouses, or the corrugated metal of Auntie Sue's backroom. The air didn't smell of ozone or boiling noodles either. It smelled sterile, filtered, expensive. A faint hum underlay everything, like the breath of a slumbering beast. Kai sat up sharply, heart pounding. A soft chime went off and a medroid rolled toward him, its polished silver frame reflecting his wild eyes. Subject Aurelian, Kai, human, age 17. It intoned calmly, vital signs stable, neural stress elevated. "Would you like a sedative? Would you like a punch in the face?" Kai shot back, scanning the room. The med bay was huge, bigger than any apartment block he'd ever lived in. The walls pulsed faintly with embedded biolights, and a panoramic window curved overhead, revealing the sweep of Neoterra from orbit. Cities glowed like neural clusters below, the planet's night side a living map of civilization. He wasn't in the clinic anymore. He wasn't even on the ground. The door hissed open and a woman in silver robes entered, not Lysera, but one of her kind, with similar lilac skin and crest ridges, though older and more severe. Two security drones floated behind her, humming with discreet menace. "You are awake," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "Good. He wishes to see you." "Who?" Kai asked, though deep down he already knew. Zirak Vorn. They escorted him through corridors that curved and spiraled like the inside of a shell. Kai had never seen architecture like this. Walls that shifted tone as you walked, lighting that adjusted to your mood, silent drones that glided in patterns, too precise to be random. Everything screamed wealth beyond imagining. They stopped before a massive door. Smooth obsidian shot through with silver veins that pulsed like a heartbeat. It opened without a sound. The chamber beyond was vast and dim. At its center stood a figure so imposing Kai's first instinct was to run. Zirak Vorn. He was taller than any being Kai had ever seen, at least 8 feet, broad-shouldered, draped in flowing armor that shimmered like liquid metal. His skin was a deeper violet than Lysera's, his crest crowned with gold-threaded filaments that pulsed faintly with light. His presence was gravitational. The air seemed heavier just from being near him, yet it wasn't the power that unnerved Kai. It was the eyes, twin orbs of swirling silver and indigo, ancient and intelligent and piercing. Eyes that had watched empires rise and fall, fortunes made and lost. "Kai Aurelian," Vorn said, his voice like thunder wrapped in velvet. "The boy who saved my wife and my unborn daughter." Kai swallowed. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," Vorn said, stepping forward with a grace that belied his size. "Most would have run. Most would have sold her location to the highest bidder. Most would not have stood against trained assassins with nothing but courage and wit." He stopped an arm's length away, lowering his massive head until their eyes were level. "You are not most, human boy." The room fell silent. Kai shifted uncomfortably under that gaze, unsure what to do with his hands. "How is she?" he asked. "Lysera is recovering. The child is strong, early, but alive." A hint of softness crept into Vorn's voice, quickly masked by authority. "You ensured that. Without you, they would both be gone." He stepped back, gesturing to a pedestal. A holographic projection shimmered to life, surveillance footage from the alley, the shaft, the clinic. Every reckless choice Kai had made replayed before them, each one more suicidal than the last. "You risked your life for someone you did not know," Vorn said. "You shielded her body with your own. And when the assassins closed in, you fought." Kai rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't really think about it." "Exactly." Vorn's voice softened further. "You acted without calculation. That is why I owe you a debt I can never repay." Kai blinked. "What?" The Tycoon turned and gestured. A panel slid open in the wall, revealing treasure beyond comprehension. Stacks of crystalline credit chips, a hovercraft plated in Orium alloy, even a starship. A sleek courier-class vessel with Kai's name etched into the hull in glowing letters. "This is yours," Vorn said. "A fraction of what you deserve. Education at the finest academies. Citizenship in the Orion League. A personal vessel, wealth enough to live 1,000 lifetimes." Kai's heart hammered. For a kid who'd eaten ration paste and slept under leaky ducts, this was more than a dream. It was everything he'd never dared imagine, but something in him twisted. All he could see was Lyra's face, 8 years old, laughing as they chased drones through the back alleys, screaming as the syndicate guards dragged her onto a transport. The Vorn logo burned into the side of the shuttle that took her. He clenched his fists. "I don't want that." The words hung in the air like static. Vorn tilted his head. "I do not understand." Kai took a shaky breath. "You said anything, right? Anything I want?" "Yes," Vorn said slowly. "Anything." Then his voice trembled. "I want my sister back." Silence. The holo flickered and died. The Tycoon stared at him, not with anger, but something deeper, heavier. His great hands closed and opened again, as if grasping for something far away. "Explain," he said quietly. Kai told him everything. About the raid on their neighborhood, about how the Orion Labor Syndicate, a subsidiary of Vorn Industrial Holdings, had taken her. About how he'd spent 5 years searching, hacking records, bribing dock workers, chasing rumors. All dead ends. "I don't even know if she's alive," Kai finished, voice breaking. "But if she is, you can find her. You have to." Vorn stood motionless for a long time. Then, slowly, he sank into a chair, as if the weight of centuries had just settled on his shoulders. "I built an empire," he said softly, almost to himself. "I gave jobs to billions. I negotiated peace between warring systems. I believed I was building a better galaxy." He looked up, and Kai saw something he had never expected: shame. "And yet, under my name, under my banners, they took your sister, children enslaved, families broken, and I did not see." Kai said nothing. His hands shook, but he held his gaze steady. Vorn rose again. But this time the movement was different, slower, more deliberate. He placed one massive hand on Kai's shoulder. "I swear to you on my life, Kai Aurelian, I will find your sister, and I will burn the stars themselves to bring her home." The next hours blurred into action. Orders shot across the Orion sector. Databases that had been locked for decades cracked open. Black Ops agents, corporate auditors, and bounty guilds mobilized under a single directive: find Lyra Aurelian. But Vorn's crusade didn't stop there. He dissolved entire subsidiaries, shut down factories built on slave labor, and unleashed a wave of internal purges that shook the galactic economy. Billions watched in stunned silence as one of the most powerful men in known space declared war on his own empire. And through it all, he kept Kai updated. Daily reports, sightings, names, leads. Slowly, a picture emerged of a girl who had survived, moved from colony to colony, always just beyond reach. One night, as Kai stared out the viewing window at the swirling blues and greens of Earth far below, the door opened behind him. Vorn entered alone this time. No guards, no drones. He carried a small holopad. His expression was unreadable. "We found her," he said. Kai's knees almost gave out. HFY, a mining colony in the Helix Belt, enslaved under a false identity. "She is alive, Kai, and she remembers you." The boy's breath hitched. He didn't trust his voice. The Tycoon stepped forward and, for the first time, placed both hands on Kai's shoulders, not as a businessman, not as a benefactor, but as a father might. "I have done many things in my long life," Vorn said quietly. "Made and lost fortunes, moved fleets and nations. But what you asked of me, what you demanded, has changed me more than any of them." His voice broke, just slightly. "You showed me what it means to deserve my power." And to Kai's astonishment, Zirak Vorn, the most powerful being in the Orion sector, bowed his head and wept, not out of guilt alone, but out of something deeper: gratitude, relief, hope. For the first time in a decade, Kai Aurelian allowed himself to believe in a future where his family could be whole again. The boy from the slums had saved a billionaire's wife, and in return, had forced a Titan to reckon with his soul, and the galaxy would never be the same. Zirak Vorn had built his empire with unflinching precision: mergers, acquisitions, trade alliances, orbital mining rights, even wars, all reduced to calculations in his mind, equations with predictable outcomes. But for the first time in over a century, those calculations meant nothing. The moment a 17-year-old courier had stood before him and asked for his sister, instead of riches, the balance sheet of his life had shifted forever. And now, every ledger he had ever written burned. The audit begins within days of Kai's request. Vorn Industrial Holdings transformed from a monolith into a war machine. Whole departments were dissolved overnight. Executives were dragged from boardrooms by corporate marshals. Black sites once protected by layers of secrecy were stormed by Vorn's personal guard. And at the center of it all was Zirak himself, not in a tower, not in a chair, but in the field. Kai watched the metamorphosis in stunned silence from the observation deck of Vorn's flagship cruiser, Ecliptica, as it cut through the velvet dark of the Orion sector. Holoscreens along the deck streamed news feeds from across the galaxy. Vorn orders full investigation into forced labor allegations. Entire syndicate leadership arrested in midnight raids. Thousands freed from illegal mines and shipyards across the stars. The name Vorn, once synonymous with power and profit, was being rewritten into something else. "Does it feel real yet?" Lysera asked softly, gliding into the observation deck. She was radiant despite her recent ordeal, her crest faintly glowing, one hand resting gently on the swell of her belly, now calm, stable, safe. Kai shook his head. "Not yet," Part of me still thinks I'll wake up back in Delta with a delivery to make and no credits to my name. Lysera smiled. Reality is often stranger than dreams. Her gaze turned distant, toward the blue jewel of a planet far below. My mate is not easily moved. You must understand, Zirak has ended wars with a single negotiation, crushed rebellions without firing a shot. Yet I have never seen him weep until the day you spoke. Kai shifted uneasily. I didn't mean to break him. You did not break him, Lysera said. You freed him, too, into the depths 3 weeks after the audit began. A lead came through, one that made Kai's heart stop. Lyra Aurelian, listed under a false name. Last seen on Haven 17, a mining colony carved into a rogue asteroid at the edge of the Helix Belt. Officially, it was a training facility for off-world laborers. In reality, it was a prison. Security's tight, said Vorn's chief of intelligence, a weary reptilian named Kel. Private army, heavy defenses, and they don't answer to anyone, not even the League. Then they answer to me, Vorn growled. The plan was surgical. A fleet of Vorn's stealth corvettes would jump into Helix space under false transponder codes. A strike team, including Vorn himself, Kel, and Kai, would infiltrate the facility under the guise of a supply convoy. Once inside, they would extract the captives and identify Lyra. Kai insisted on joining the mission. Vorn tried to refuse, but Lysera overruled him. You owe the boy this, she said, and she deserves to see that her brother never stopped looking. 3. Haven-17 Haven-17 was a wound in the void. The asteroid's surface was jagged and raw, its veins of iron and cobalt stripped bare by centuries of mining. The colony itself was a sprawling maze of steel and glass grafted onto the rock, fences, turrets, and labor blocks ringed by plasma barriers. From orbit, it looked like a scar dot as the corvettes slipped into position. Kai's pulse thundered in his ears. He had spent 9 years dreaming of this place. Now it was real. Stay close, Kel hissed as the boarding ramp hissed open. The air on Haven 17 was thin and bitter, carrying the scent of metal and despair. Emaciated workers shuffled between barracks under the watchful eyes of armed guards. Most were aliens. Some were human. All wore the same dull gray uniforms and hollow expressions. Slave pens, Kai whispered, anger boiling in his chest. Not for long, Vorn said. The infiltration went smoothly. Their forged supply credentials passed inspection. They were waved through the checkpoints. Within 30 minutes, they were inside the central data hub. Kel hacked into the facility's records while Vorn and Kai stood guard. Got it, Kel hissed. Cell Block C, Sector 7. Female, age 20, human, transferred here 6 standard years ago. Lyra, Kai breathed. Then we go, Vorn said. For reunion corridors of Haven 17 were narrow and cold. The deeper they went, the worse the conditions became. Cells with no light, no sanitation, no hope. The guards didn't even bother reacting to them. They thought they were inspectors. They thought they were safe when they reached cell C7 to 19. Kai's heart felt like it might burst. The door slid open with a hiss. Inside, a young woman knelt by a small cot, repairing a worn-out blanket with shaking hands. Her hair was longer now, tangled and streaked with grime, and her cheeks were hollow from years of malnutrition. But her eyes were the same. Warm brown, bright, unbroken. Lyra. Kai's voice cracked. The woman froze. Slowly, she turned. For a moment, confusion clouded her features. Then recognition struck like lightning. Kai, she whispered. It was all he could do not to collapse. He stumbled forward and caught her in his arms, holding her like he would never let go. She trembled against him, sobbing into his chest. I thought you were dead, she choked. I thought you were, he said, tears streaming down his face. I never stopped looking. I promised. They clung to each other, years of pain dissolving in a single, desperate embrace. Behind them, Zirak Vorn stood silently, watching. For all his wealth, for all his conquests, he had never seen anything so powerful, nor anything so humbling. The reckoning's rescue was swift and brutal. Once Lyra was safe, Vorn dropped the pretense of diplomacy. His fleet decloaked in orbit, surrounding Haven 17 with overwhelming firepower. He broadcast a single message to the entire facility. I am Zirak Vorn. Your masters have sold their last soul. Within hours, every guard and overseer was arrested. The facility's command surrendered without a fight. Tens of thousands of laborers, some who had been slaves for decades, were liberated. Across the galaxy, news feeds exploded. The man once accused of fueling the machine of oppression had become its most relentless destroyer. His actions triggered revolts in dozens of colonies. Corporations panicked. The League convened an emergency session, but Vorn did not care. He had seen too much. Vi, the promise back aboard the Ecliptica. Lyra sat in the med bay wrapped in a soft blanket, staring out at the stars. Kai sat beside her, his hand never leaving hers. You're safe now, he whispered. Are we going home? She asked. Yes, he said. We're going home. Zirak entered quietly, standing a respectful distance away. When Lyra noticed him, she tensed, but Kai squeezed her hand reassuringly. This is the man who found you, he said softly. The man who made it happen. Lyra's lips parted. You're. Yes, Vorn said simply. And I am sorry. The girl stared at him for a long moment. Then, to Kai's surprise, she nodded. Then prove it. Make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Vorn knelt before her, the most powerful man in the Orion sector, and bowed his head. I intend to. On my name, on my life, I will. And in that moment, something broke inside Zirak Vorn, and something new took its place. Not the cold ambition of a tycoon, but the fierce resolve of a man determined to make amends. For the first time in his life, Kai Aurelian felt like the universe had tilted in his favor. His sister was alive. The empire that had destroyed their family was now tearing itself apart to fix the damage. And the man who once ruled the stars with an iron fist now fought with a human heart. The reckoning had begun. The galaxy changed in waves, like ripples from a stone dropped into a still pond. News of the Haven 17 liberation spread faster than light-speed transmissions. Broadcasts replayed footage of gaunt workers stepping into freedom for the first time in decades. Entire planets erupted in celebration, others in protest. Across the Orion sector, slavers fled their posts. Companies shredded their contracts, and governments scrambled to rewrite laws that had been ignored for generations. And at the heart of the upheaval stood a strange, unlikely trio, a teenage human courier from the slums of Neoterra, his long-lost sister, and the most powerful alien industrialist in the known galaxy. Kai Aurelian's name was now known on 1,000 worlds, whispered in cantinas, praised in newsrooms, and shouted in the streets. The boy who humbled a titan. But Kai wasn't thinking about fame. He was thinking about home. A promise fulfilled 2 weeks after the rescue. The Ecliptica descended through the gray skies of Sector Delta. For the first time in nearly a decade, Kai and Lyra stepped onto Earth's soil together. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. The same tangled wires, the same rain-slick streets, the same neon flicker in every gutter. But everything felt different. Lyra clung to his arm, wide-eyed at the city that had become a ghost in her memory. It's smaller than I remember, she said softly. You just got taller, Kai replied with a grin. I barely recognized the place myself. They walked through the market, past the noodle stall, where Auntie Sue broke into tears and shoved free food into their hands, past the alley where Kai had once hidden from syndicate thugs, past the walls covered in graffiti, slogans of resistance he now understood with deeper meaning. When they reached their old apartment, a one-room cell in a collapsing tower, Lyra stopped in the doorway. Her eyes scanned the cracked walls, the broken window, the little corner where they'd drawn pictures as kids. I used to think this was the whole universe, she whispered. Kai's throat tightened. Me too. She turned to him then, fierce and determined. We can't stay here, he blinked. What do you mean? I mean we don't have to, she said. We can build something new, something better, for kids like us, for everyone they hurt. It was the first time Kai truly saw her, not as the little sister he'd lost, but as a woman forged by survival and strength. And in her words, he felt the stirrings of a purpose larger than either of them. 3. The Tycoon's offer 3 months later. In a sprawling council chamber orbiting the League capital, Kai stood before Zirak Vorn again. But this time, they stood as equals. Vorn looked different now, still imposing, still powerful, but somehow lighter. The lines of guilt that had once shadowed his features had softened into lines of resolve. His empire was smaller now, but cleaner, restructured under strict ethical charters. Billions of credits had been diverted into reparations, relief funds, and reconstruction programs. And still, he bowed his head when Kai entered. "You have returned," Vorn said. "I hoped you would." Kai nodded. "I had to. There's something I want." A faint smile tugged at the corners of the Tycoon's mouth. "I suspected as much. Is it another request that will turn my world upside down?" "Probably," Kai said. "I want to join the Stellar Vanguard." The words echoed through the chamber like a shot. Vorn raised a brow. "The Vanguard? You would trade comfort and wealth for service and sacrifice?" Kai shrugged. "It's not a trade. It's a mission. I don't want to be remembered as the kid who saved your wife. I want to make sure no one ever needs saving like that again." For a long moment, Zirak Vorn was silent. Then he stepped forward and placed a massive hand on Kai's shoulder. "Then you will have my full support," he said solemnly. "I will sponsor your application personally. And when you wear the Vanguard crest, know that you do not serve alone. My fleets, my resources, my influence, they are yours." Kai looked up, startled. "Why, after everything I put you through?" Vorn's voice grew quiet. "Because you gave me something no one else ever dared, the truth. And because, in saving one life, you saved mine." To Kai's astonishment, the Titan's eyes shimmered. He blinked them clear before they could fall. For a future Retenfe years that followed were a blur of training, missions, and purpose. Kai entered the Stellar Vanguard Academy at 18, graduating with distinction. He specialized in conflict resolution and humanitarian intervention, leading daring operations to dismantle trafficking rings, rescue displaced refugees, and broker peace in volatile border systems. Lyra, for her part, became a fierce advocate for labor rights and founded the Aurelian Foundation, dedicated to supporting children and families displaced by corporate exploitation. Backed by Vorn's resources, it grew into one of the most influential humanitarian networks in the galaxy. And Lysera Vorn, the woman whose life had set all this in motion, gave birth to a healthy daughter. She named her Kaya. Every year, on Kaya's birthday, the Vorns invited the Aurelians to their estate on the moon of Selene Prime. They shared stories, meals, and memories. And every year, Kaya would ask the same question, "Uncle Kai, tell me again how you saved my mama." And Kai would smile, shake his head, and say, "I didn't save her. We saved each other." The final meeting, it was many years later. Kai, now a decorated Vanguard envoy, Lyra a leader in the League Senate, when he received a message summoning him back to Selene Prime. Zirak Vorn's health was failing. Age, which no technology could outrun, had finally caught up with him. Kai found the old Tycoon sitting beneath a tree in the estate gardens, wrapped in a shawl of silver cloth, his once imposing frame frail, but his eyes still sharp as nebulae. "You came," Vorn said, his voice soft but steady. "Of course I did," Kai said. Taking a seat beside him, they sat in silence for a while, watching the twin moons rise over the horizon. Then Vorn spoke again. "Do you remember the first thing you asked of me?" Kai nodded. "I asked for my sister." "No," Vorn said with a faint smile. "You asked me to be better, to use my power for something beyond myself. That was the day my life truly began." Kai swallowed hard. "You've done more than anyone could have asked." Vorn shook his head. "Not more. Just enough." His gaze turned distant, reflective. "You taught me that legacy is not measured in wealth or empires, but in lives changed. And when I am gone, I want you to remember something." "What's that?" "That you were never just a boy from Delta," Vorn said. "You were the spark that lit 1,000 suns." A tear slipped down Kai's cheek before he could stop it. Vorn reached out a trembling hand and rested it against his shoulder. The same gesture he'd given him years ago. "Thank you," the old Tycoon whispered, "for saving my family, and for letting me save yours." VI. Legacy amongst Sherak Vorn passed peacefully a week later. His memorial was broadcast across the galaxy, not as the farewell of a Tycoon, but as the celebration of a man who changed the course of history. At the ceremony, Kai spoke briefly. "He taught me that power is meaningless unless it serves those without it," he said, "and that forgiveness is the most powerful act in the universe." When he stepped down from the podium, Lyra squeezed his hand, and Lysera embraced him. Little Kaya, no longer a child, but a young woman ready to inherit her father's mantle, smiled through tears. "Will you stay with us?" she asked. Kai looked up at the stars, countless and infinite. "I'll always be with you," he said. But there's still work to do. The next day, the Vanguard launched a new initiative, a fleet dedicated entirely to liberation and justice, christened the Vorn-Aurelian Alliance. Its flagship bore a single inscription on its hull. From a single act of courage, 1,000 worlds were freed, and as the ship cut through the void on its first mission, Kai stood on its bridge, watching the starlight stretch before him. He was no longer a runaway courier, no longer a desperate boy searching for a lost sister. He was a guardian of peace, of hope, of legacy. And somewhere in the heart of the cosmos, he felt the echoes of a promise kept.